Ethiopia and Eritrea could possibly go to war soon over ports in the Red Sea. In order for you to understand why, I have to explain the context. So recently in October of 2023, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was talking about Ethiopia's historic right to the Red Sea, claiming that the Red Sea is Ethiopia's natural boundary and that not having a seaport leaves Ethiopia in a geographic prison, as Ethiopia is currently a landlocked country, which poses numerous challenges economically, strategically, and geopolitically for Ethiopia. Abiy's comments about the Red Sea made his neighbors in the region, like Eritrea, Somalia, and Djibouti, very uneasy, not only because he didn't brief anyone about what he was going to say, but because he followed up his comments a couple days later, warning that the lack of port access could cause a conflict in the future. Not only that, but Abiy then arranged for an unprompted army demonstration in Ethiopia, with the head of the Air Force warning his troops to get ready for war. Following this, it was found out that there was troop movement in Ethiopia around the Eritrean border, as well as an influx of weapons supplied by the United Arab Emirates. Abiy did eventually make clear that he was not trying to threaten anyone, saying peace is the ideal way to handle the situation, but in private he may have said otherwise, with one of his officials telling The Economist that, quote, "If it is not achieved by other means, war is the only way." For context, Eritrea used to be a part of Ethiopia, which meant Ethiopia has always had access to the ports. However, in 1993, Eritrea gained independence. Despite this, they still allowed Ethiopia to use the ports until 1998, when the two countries went to war over a disputed border region in Badme. Eritrea cut off Ethiopia's access to them, leading to Ethiopia being forced to pay neighboring country Djibouti $1.5 billion a year in fees for their port access. Currently, 95% of all Ethiopia's trade volume is in the port of Dorale in Djibouti, and realistically, Djibouti can charge however much they want for the port because they know Ethiopia has no other options. You might be wondering why the port is so important in the first place. Well, ports are important because they help facilitate economic development as they enable trade and support supply chains, especially Red Sea ports, where there is a lot of movement. Around 10 to 20% of global trade, which includes at least 6 million barrels of oil, passes through the Red Sea every day. A study by the United Nations in 2018 found that access to the sea can account for 25 to 30% of a country's gross domestic product. This is a study that Abiy himself has referenced on multiple occasions. Out of the top 50 countries by GDP, only 3 are landlocked and all of them have ports. Ethiopia places 60 on the list while being landlocked and having no access to ports, which shows how much potential the country has to grow if given access to a port. Being landlocked is undesirable as landlocked countries are often more dependent on neighbors, have less influence, and feel more vulnerable. Ethiopia is also going to become the only country out of the 30 most populous nations that is landlocked by 2030, which is why Abiy referred to it as a geographical prison. In 2018, Abiy did win a Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and one of the conditions of the deal was Eritrea would allow access to the ports again for Ethiopia. However, this is yet to happen, and recently Abiy is no longer on good terms with Eritrea and their leader, Isaias Afwerki, due to him signing a peace deal with the TPLF, which Isaias was not happy about at all, mainly because his troops helped fight the TPLF with Abiy's, and he believed the deal to be the result of Western intervention and imperialism. This leads us to the current conflict over the ports and the potential war looming ahead. Abiy is anxious about being closed off. One reason is that in the case of a threat, enemies can block off the Djibouti port and subsequent highway that connects to it, leaving Ethiopia resourceless. This was a big fear during the Tigray War in 2020, and something he is trying to overcome. He has already tried obtaining other ports, for example striking a deal with Kenya for their Lamu port. However, this has been delayed multiple times and doesn't seem to be making any progress. At the moment, there's a lot of division in the country between ethnic militias, which doesn't put Ethiopia in the best position to attack. However, if war were to start between the two countries, it could be disastrous. Ethiopia was already a part of the most deadly conflict of the 2020s, that being the Tigray War. And last time Ethiopia went to war with Eritrea, 100,000 people lost their lives. So if this war happens, it could result in a crisis that plunges both states into collapse. Despite this worst case scenario, there's no doubt that outsiders will be interested to see what is going to happen, especially the countries in the area like the Gulf states. If the war becomes reality, I believe the United Arab Emirates will back Ethiopia, while Saudi Arabia will back Eritrea, as they both have demonstrated interest in this conflict since 2018, when they both played a massive role in the peace deal between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Russia has also been more involved in Africa recently, meeting with both leaders earlier in the year. It seems like Putin has a stronger relationship with Eritrea, but that doesn't really matter. If Russia can establish a navy presence in the Eritrean port before Ethiopia invades, then they are most likely going to back Eritrea and protect their influence. But if Ethiopia invades before that happens, then Russia will probably back Ethiopia. I do believe Ethiopia deserves a port to enable future growth, but a new war seems like bad news for everyone involved.